Would it be a smart idea if I shaved my balls with a hacking saw?
What?
Actually, no, wait, wrong
Bro,
recording
what are you
session.
talking about, man?
Hello, people. Don't mind my depressed voice. I literally just woke up like 5 minutes ago. So, welcome back to Payday 3. Today I will be talking about this new update that has recently come around the corner. So, the first thing I'm going to be talking about in the update is the introduction to the adaptive armor system. The adaptive armor is the only armor in the entirety of the game that allows you to be able to recharge all of the damaged chunks in a few seconds. You might think that is overpowered, but it is completely useless, and I will get into that in a little bit. The difference between the normal armor and the adaptive armor is the normal armor is only able to recharge a portion of the damaged chunks. Meanwhile, the adaptive armor is able to completely recharge itself to full if you're out of combat. Keep in mind, you need to have at least one armor chunk to be able to restore it. Normally, the armor has two armor chunks, and if one is destroyed, you will not be able to completely recharge the second one, because it is completely broken. As long as you have armor, and the chunk is not completely destroyed, then you will be able to completely restore it without having any sort of issue. But you might be thinking, why is it almost useless in my opinion? Well, that's because it has three problems. Number one being is the downs. The amount of downs you have is set to 2. Second is the damage reduction is set to 5%. All the armor, except for the adaptive armor, provides a damage resistance of 25%. Now, I am someone that likes to play extremely aggressively and be on the front lines and be able to tank a lot of damage, but when I tried out the new adaptive armor, it completely sucked entirely, because it was not able to literally sustain itself for more than 5 seconds. But what's exactly the third reason of it being bad? I mentioned 3. Well, the last one is because it takes too long to sort of recharge itself. I know 4.5 seconds is something that sort of like does not seem that much compared to the other armors that require like what, 8 seconds to recharge itself. But my god, that recharge time is not really that good, because I understand that if it was too short it would be too overpowered, but it's not really that much. Like, it still requires you to wait a lot, because what if the enemies rush you? The purpose of the adaptive armor is to sort of play a little bit more passively. It forces you to play a bit more defensively and more passively. You sort of have to think of it as a crutch that you're constantly holding on to. If you get too greedy with it, it will completely fall off. But if you treat it right and you play a bit more passively, then you will be able to succeed with it effectively. That is why I do not like it. So I'm just practically staying away from it. Another thing that they have also added to the game is the new Adrenaline feature. The Adrenaline feature is commonly referred to as the Overheal mechanic. The Overheal mechanic just practically allows you to be able to sustain a bit of damage before your armor or your health takes any sort of damage. Meaning, if you have an Overheal, instead of taking armor damage, Overheal is the one that will tank the damage for you. This Overheal effect will be indicated by the green outline over your health bar. And the interesting is, each time you use a first aid kit, it will sort of slow down the effect by a little bit. Or at least I think it will completely stop the timer for a few seconds, because it will actually degrade itself for a short duration. It's not going to stay on you forever, so you need to know when is the perfect opportunity to be able to use it. I actually like this feature because it sort of allows you to use any sort of like leftover first aid kits that are like left around the map and use it as a bit of like a bit of sustainability, because normally you take armor damage first before your health is the one that takes the damage. But instead, if you have Overheal, then your armor will be completely untouched, and Adrenaline, or the Overheal health bar, will be the one that takes the damage. But the only way you can actually get the Overheal mechanic is if you're at 100% health, or you heal that is more than your like max health. Example being, if you have say 60 health and your medic bag heals you for 50, then you would have 10 extra Overheal. That's basically the basic gist of it. There's also a new skill that they have added to the table that will basically work alongside the new Adrenaline feature from the medic bag or the first aid kits. It buffs both the player and vastly increases their survivability. And I'm going to touch down on the skill lines. Fortitude Basic increases your maximum health by 50, and whenever you heal above or maximum health, you gain and refresh grit. The Ace version increases the number of downs by 1 and your bleed out timer to 50%. Stockpile is the mastery, aka the final skill line on the skill. It just basically increases the amount of additional charges on your deployable bag. So for default you have 2, and it basically just adds the 2 extra. This also works alongside of the pocket. So that's a fun fact. Health Siphone, whenever a Whenever a crewmate heals using your medic bag, you heal 40% of the amount of healed. If this heals you above full health, the excess amount is addressed to adrenaline. Unyielding, your maximum amount of health is increased by 15 for each down you currently have, so wearing the lesser armor actually has a specific purpose.
Holy Jesus! What is that? What the fuck is that?
Physiological, what the fuck you want to pronounce it. Whenever you have adrenaline, you gain 10% additional adrenaline for each down you currently have. So you basically will be able to store more adrenaline if you have lesser down or more downs, pardon me. So the standard leaning armor is the perfect opportunity for that one. Walking tall, your adrenaline degrades 25% slower for each down you currently have. If you have any amount of adrenaline, you can use the first aid kits to pause its degradation for 15 seconds. Pain Asymbolia. As long as you have adrenaline in either edge, grit, or rush, the effect of these buffs are doubled, and you take 10% less damage to your adrenaline. Basically, it increases the buffing effect of both edge, grit, and rush. Instead of being normally 10%, it actually increases up to 20%, which is a really nice feature. And you also take 10% less damage to your adrenaline, which is also pretty nice. But you need to have adrenaline for the buff effect to be doubled. Finally, let's talk about a few features that they introduced, aka some quality of life changes. The first thing is the sniper rifle. The sniper rifle sort of got a buff, but I'm seeing this as more of a quality of life changes. Normally, whenever you shoot around while aiming down the sights, this game forces you to step away from the scope, and in order to chamber another round. But now you're able to chamber around while you're aiming down the sights. But keep in mind that the scope will sort of wobble around just to sort of mess up with your accuracy. Another thing they also added is it actually shows you the statistics of each armor. So if you press say the heavy ballistic leaning armor, it will show you how much chunks it have, how much the time it takes to regen the damaged chunks, the maximum amount of downs you have, the speed penalty, and etc, etc. This is a really niche little feature that should have been in the game in the first place, but you know, it's really nice to have. Another thing that they also did is a couple of improvements to the skill lines. Right now, the amount of skill lines you have is up to 28 instead of being from 21. This is actually pretty good because you don't have to sacrifice a few of the skills that you want to keep in exchange for another. Now you are able to get multiple skills without having to worry about sacrificing too much. They have also changed a few skills which I'm going to be listing. The manipulate skill line Overbearing has a new extra feature that allows you to make up to 3 tied hostages to follow you. Tank skill line has been changed a little bit. Normally you would have Disengage, but this has been moved to the Escapist. So what has been replaced? It's called Clean Slate. Basically, if you have no armor, you can interact with an armor bag to completely restore an armor chunk. This works with every single armor, but you need to have no armor in order to be able to restore it. This is actually pretty good, and it actually forces you to be more aggressive with your gameplay style if you like to use lighter armor. The Escapist skill line, like I said, just practically had the Disengage effect. Basically, the old Mastery had the Swift skill, but instead Swift has been moved to the 5th skill in the Escapist tree, and on the Mastery one it has the Disengage one. Finally, let's talk about the a skill line that has been changed for some reason to one of the worst existings in the game. It is basically a really poor attempt of bringing back dodge from Payday 2. I do not want dodge in Payday 3. Nobody wants dodge. Do not listen to the half-brained rogue players say that we need dodge back. We do not need dodge back, thank you very much. We need to stay the fuck away from dodge. That's what we should be doing. But hey, we have half-brained pricks that are just yapping their mouths out constantly. But hey, so what does it do exactly? As long as you have rush, all shots from a marked enemy have a 10% chance to not deal any sort of damage to you whatsoever. It needs to be a marked enemy for this effect to be occurred. You see the issue here? I hope so. If you have any sort of functioning brain cells, but if you don't, I'm not going to fucking read it out again. But let's leave it. The Kinetic shortcut has been changed to where whenever you destroy a Zapper's battery, you are able to replenish one ECM jammer. You might think that this is completely useless, but keep in mind that there's a skill line where it makes the ECM jammers be able to stun enemies if you shoot them. So this actually is a pretty good feature, and it allows you to be more consistent with your stuns. So this is a pretty good change. Another thing they changed is the precision shot. Normally it consumes edge whenever you shoot, every time you like aim down the sights and shoot, which was kinda annoying. But instead, as long as you have edge and are aiming down the sights, you will do extra damage based on your scope's magnifications, and you will also be able to penetrate through an additional target. And it does not consume any sort of edge whatsoever, so this is a pretty good change, in my opinion. This basically allows every single weapon to almost one-shot if you build your weapons correctly. And Cutting Shot just basically got an update to make it where it scales much more better with all the weapons. So, yeah, just a nice feature. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, they nerfed this one. Which I don't really care, which doesn't really affect that much, but, you know, a tiny nerf. I'm sure it's not going to affect that much, but yeah, anyway. They buffed the Ziff commando, and I think it's better for me to actually simply show it to you instead of actually, you know, explaining what they did. But to keep it short, they basically make this into the literal best weapon in close range, but the worst weapon in mid to long range. Take a look. But yeah, that is all I have to offer so far. So to keep it short, a new armor named the Adaptive Armor, a new feature called the Adrenaline, or aka Overheal, certain skill lines have been completely changed, a new skill line has been added named the Fortitude, which is a really good skill, and the amount of skill points you have been increased from 21 up to 28. Certain weapons have been buffed, like the R900, where it allows you to cycle through its bolt without having to go out of the scope, and the Ziv commando have been completely buffed to a literal powerhouse. That's it. The update's pretty good, but it doesn't really add that much stuff. But again, it still adds some new stuff, but you know, I'm not really gonna complain about it. Besides, it's a good update. Thumbs up to the devs. I'm proud. I'm really proud. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go and hang myself because I'm depressed. So, goodbye. Adios.